Welcome to Transform Now, a podcast focused on intelligent automation and brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. On this program, we talk about how organizations globally are rethinking the way they operate, utilizing process orchestration and AI-enabled digital workers to free up humans to do the work that matters most. We also share insights and tips on how you can embrace this new way of working and unleash your full potential. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is our weekly pulse check, taking a look at what's in the news related to automation and AI. And Michael, we've got three interesting articles today to mull over. Let's start.
And I hear that first article is creating quite a buzz.
Yes, no pun intended, or maybe you should say
it was intended.
So the first article comes to us from the New York Post, and it's titled, "Amazon's Delivery Drones Become the Scourge of Texas Town. It Sounds Like a Giant Hive of Bees," quote unquote. And Michael, I know last week we talked about an article that had ties to your college town. I think it was written by a professor from your alma mater. This article actually ties to my college because it takes place in College Station, Texas, where I went to college. And it's an interesting article, though, because, I remember, gosh, it was 11 or 12 years ago when Jeff Bezos came forward and said, we're going to have these drones delivering Amazon Prime packages. And I think he did it on 60 Minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember everybody was going crazy over that. It's like, this is the coolest thing ever. Here we are, 11, 12 years later, it hasn't happened. And so I think this article kind of grabbed my attention because I was thinking about that. But this is an interesting twist. They've been really testing hard in certain locations. In College Station, as a community, they decided to do a test at scale. So we're talking hundreds of drones up in the air all at the same time. And they're testing out this capability to deliver a package within 1 hour of it being ordered online. So what did you think about the article and just kind of how the community in College Station is reacting?
Well, I can certainly empathize with them. And this sounds very much like another article or story I read about the issues that Waymo was having in California with some of their driverless cars. And this comes to the issue of scale and scaling up and the issues that perhaps you didn't consider when you're looking at things one at a time. AI is great. All our automation stuff is great. And when you start doing things at scale and faster, things look a little bit different than in the best case scenario you look at as an engineer. And when you start broadening these things out to scale, they come up with new challenges that they perhaps didn't even consider. So certainly in this case here, where the noise issues coming into play, I can imagine if people said, well, we want to do anything by Harley Davidson motorcycle because it'll be faster to get our packages out there. One at a time, people could understand. But if you had, like you said, 900 packages an hour going out or whatever the thing is, that would be a lot of noise from motorcycles. And sure. So, well, we need to do something about that, right?
Yeah.
Well, now we have these drones, and inherently, a single drone has a slight buzz to it, and they measured the decibels and said it was a small amount of noise. But when you have hundreds of them doing that every hour, going to and from the same location, I can see how the noise pollution part of that could be substantial. So this again comes back to, as we adopt our technologies, looking at some of the unintended consequences that we may find out when we start doing things at scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny they chose a college town to test this out in, I guess,
because there's lots of noise already.
Lots of Amazon Prime orders, being made by college students.
Sure.
But I don't think they counted on the citizens of the city being really bothered by the noise level, especially when you have that many taken off. one more thing I'll point out, the article on the New York Post had a little video showing the drones coming down and bringing the package. Did you see how it dropped it at it was probably 15 to 20 feet off the ground, and it drops the package and it hits the ground really hard. So that's surprising that they would put that in their video. I'm thinking no one is going to want a product, being treated that way, especially anything fragile. So
they may also package it differently for airborne delivery. You don't know. So there's a possibility that they are planning that into the packaging as they're delivering it that way. Because also they have to think about some of those paper packages that you get that are protected inside of a van when they're driving around. Well, if you're flying it through the air through various weather conditions, perhaps they would need to use some other type of packaging.
Yep. Well, our second article today is from Psychology Today, and it's titled "The Great AI Detection Dilemma. Neither humans nor machines can reliably spot AI online. Does it really matter?" This is talking about recent research that uncovered that neither humans nor AI are consistently able to detect AI-generated content, which is pretty interesting to say the least. And, it asks the question in the title, okay, if that's the case, does it really matter? What are your thoughts on this?
I would contend with no, it doesn't really matter for a couple different reasons. Because, let's put it this way, as we're using tools like spell check, for example, to support our writing, if we took raw original documents that we would have to go back through and identify our spelling mistakes, we would spend a lot more time doing that. But the machines, as we're typing, are identifying or even correcting them on our behalf as we go forward. Is that bad? Is that a bad thing that I'm sending out documents or emails that don't have spelling mistakes? I don't think so. I think it's a good thing. So when we start talking about identifying AI, specifically AI-generated content, in my mind, it comes into two different paths. One is the traditional work products that we're all used to. Does it matter if an email comes from a generative AI component that sends out something for thank you for your order kind of thing through email? I would think it's probably pretty benign at that point. Where it may matter is, in fact, if you have news stories and or other aspects that are considered to be potentially inflammatory or misleading, because AI generated, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump walking on a beach holding hands together and smiling kind of thing. Like those are the kind of weird stuff that's been generated. And obviously in these cases, it's very obviously, fake. But when you start getting the next generation where, literally you won't be able to tell if in fact that news conference is actually something that was filmed or if something that was generated by AI, now you have a bigger issue. So depending on how they decide to move forward with any kind of governance or whatnot, the detection part of it, unless tools are put in place to specifically add some kind of watermark or something to do that, I'm not sure that you'll be able to. Yeah. I'm not sure it will matter all that much, only because I think the detection methods they're trying to use will be thwarted one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, we all get form letters every single day, right? From businesses, from people. We've learned to kind of put up with that. So I agree. I don't think it's going to matter that much. The only thing that would bother me, I think, is if someone was conversing with me and then I came to find out that I was conversing with an AI model that they used as a proxy. And there's been talk about that as a future possibility. We might all have our own large language model. So you could essentially put a chatbot on top of that and say, hey, this person wants to chat with me. Go talk to it and just be me for the next, 5 minutes. I'm not crazy about that. And who knows if that would even happen. But it is interesting. I think this is something that comes up a lot about, is it AI generated or human generated? And I think we're getting a little too high strung about it. I think we'll all learn to deal with it over time.
And what would happen in a false positive kind of scenario where like, no, I literally wrote that and some generative AI or AI somewhere said, no, that was all AI generated. And in reality, like, no, I actually did it. How do you prove that you did it?
That's right. That's right. So our last article is from Forbes, and it's titled, "When Automation and AI Are Better Than People for Software Development." Now, this one's a little specific, and it's really kind of in the IT software dev realm. We don't talk about automation and AI in the IT function that much. So this one I thought would be good, but it also makes, I think, some pretty good points about automation being an effective guardrail to software that is getting, software changes are getting deployed all the time. It's almost impossible for humans to inspect it in, every piece of code every single day, 24/7. And so automation in this world can really be effective at detecting when something's wrong before it goes out in mass and creates, some kind of major issue. So what did you think about just the points it's making around that and a few other things?
Well, again, the article is about software deployment. So looking at how these software and maybe even configuration changes are being sent out to devices. Again, this gets back to the quantity, the number of changes to be doing, and also the scale at which those changes have to be deployed. So, for example, if you're AT&T, Verizon, O2, anybody else, any of these large wireless carriers, they may have hundreds or thousands of wire cell towers that have equipment that have to have a change sent to. Well, what happens if that you send that change out, that configuration change, and it points to a non-existent area, and so that now it loses connection with those cell towers. Now you have potentially thousands of cell towers that would be now out of commission, and all of their service would be completely down because of a simple check that was missed. So going back to my earlier discussion about spell check, these are things that are put in place to support and prevent us from making those kinds of easy changes or easy fixes that may not necessarily be accurate because we are doing them so quickly. So I think from a software deployment perspective, it's a perfect way to do the checks and balances as things go out. But it also highlights another kind of change or a viewpoint difference that we start moving into as we look at sort of AI agents and other agents, this whole concept of agency by software, where we have perhaps a hierarchy where the changes are being made once, deployed by some software, checked by some other types of software to validate those changes are okay, and then finally, send out to the field because now they've gone through several sets of checks to validate. In fact, those other checks may not necessarily know what the changes are, but they may check for potentially harmful changes, kind of like a, say, antivirus, but something along those lines where it's validating that the configuration changes, the software changes won't necessarily cause a dramatic impact other than the one that was expected for that particular piece of software. So it's a good way of doing the checks and balances built into it. But as we talked about even in the first article, when you start doing these things at scale, it really makes a big difference because one change could be devastating to your business. As we saw just a little while ago with sort of that CrowdStrike issue they had with the airlines and whatnot, where one configuration change, costs billions of dollars of damage across a number of different environments. So it's not just hypothetical. This is actually potential, and we've seen it happen.
Yeah, I thought about AI as well when I read this article, and the conversation we're having with customers almost every day about how can they safely provision Gen AI in some cases hundreds of times a day in the course of a process automation. And that's another great example of where you need automation to log and track and audit and maybe review the outputs that are coming from Gen AI before they go to a customer or go to a supplier or go into a document. And you can use human in the loop to a degree, but for some of these automations that we've seen customers, wanting to do with Gen AI, it's going to be almost impossible for humans to look at every piece of that. So, I think digital workers are part of the solution here. As the article said, automation begets automation. I agree with that. I think it's a really good use case for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us to talk about the news. Be sure and listen to our other podcast that we publish each week featuring a tremendous guest. And we will see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of intelligent automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.